I still remember the sound of Mark's voice that morning. It had been so long since he'd called me just to talk. My son's voice was cheerful, almost too cheerful, the kind of tone people use when they're hiding something behind politeness. "Fly out, Grandma. We want you here for Thanksgiving," he said, his words rolling through the phone like music I hadn't heard in years. For a moment, I didn't breathe. It had been nearly 3 years since we'd all been under one roof. I'd spent the last few Thanksgivings in my quiet little house in Maine, eating reheated turkey and watching old holiday movies alone. I'd told myself it didn't matter. I told myself they were busy. That's what mothers do. We make excuses for our children, even when the silence hurts more than words ever could. But this time felt different. The way he said, "We want you." It sounded real. I clutched the phone tightly, smiling like a schoolgirl. "Are you sure, Mark? I don't want to be any trouble." He laughed softly. "Mom, it's Thanksgiving. Of course we want you here. The kids have been asking about you." My heart ached at those words. The kids. I'd missed birthdays, recitals, graduations, all the things that used to light my world. Maybe this was my chance to feel like family again. I hung up and sat in my chair for a long time, staring at the framed photo of my late husband, Charles. "Did you hear that, love?" I whispered. "They want me there." The next few days were a flurry of movement. I opened my cedar chest, the one Charles built for me our first Christmas together, and took out the soft green sweater I'd worn to every family gathering. It was old now, frayed at the cuffs, but it smelled faintly of lavender and wood smoke. I packed carefully, folding memories between layers of fabric. The tiny cross-stitch Lila made when she was 7, the pearl brooch my husband gave me on our 30th anniversary, and his pocket watch, the one that had stopped ticking the day he died. The flight ticket was expensive, but I managed. I sold a small sapphire ring I never wore. "For family," I murmured to myself as the jeweler counted out the cash. The night before I left, I barely slept. I made sure the plants were watered, unplugged the kettle, double-checked the stove, habits of a woman who has spent too many years alone. When morning came, I put on my sweater, buttoned my coat, and called for a taxi. The driver helped me with my bag, and as we drove to the airport, I watched the trees outside my window blur into streaks of gold and brown. The world felt alive again. I hadn't felt that in a long, long time. At the airport, I was slow but steady. People rushed past me, faces buried in phones, but I didn't mind. I clutched my ticket, smiling when the young attendant called me sweetheart. For once, I felt seen. On the plane, I sat by the window. The clouds below looked like mountains of cotton, soft and endless. I thought about my children, Mark with his charming smile and endless ambition, Lila with her sharp eyes and colder heart. We'd drifted apart after Charles's death, but maybe, just maybe, this Thanksgiving would heal what time and pride had broken. I closed my eyes and imagined their faces lighting up when they saw me walk through the gate. The hugs, the laughter, the smell of roasted turkey filling the house again. When the pilot announced our descent, my heart fluttered. I brushed my hair in the reflection of the window and whispered, "Let's go home." I had no idea that the home I remembered no longer existed, that the love I believed in had already packed its bags and left long ago. But for now, I was just a grandmother, hopeful, trembling, and ready to be loved again. The plane touched down in Chicago just past noon. My hands trembled slightly as I reached for my purse, excitement making my heart beat faster than it had in years. I hadn't felt this kind of anticipation since my wedding day. I imagined them waiting for me beyond the security gate, Mark with his confident stride, Lila waving, the grandkids running into my arms. I'd even brought them each small gifts, a knitted scarf for Lily, a puzzle set for Sam, and a box of fudge I'd made the night before. But when I stepped into the arrival hall, the world felt too big and too quiet. I scanned the crowd. Faces everywhere, strangers greeting one another with laughter and hugs. But not my family. Not one familiar face. "They must be running late," I whispered, adjusting my coat. I wheeled my little floral suitcase to a bench near the doors and waited. Minutes became half an hour. Half an hour turned into 2. I called Mark, no answer. I called Lila, straight to voicemail. I left cheerful messages at first, pretending nothing was wrong. "Hi sweetheart, I'm here. Flight landed safely. I'm by baggage claim 4. Can't wait to see you. By the third hour, my voice had changed. Mark, it's Mom again. I hope everything's okay. Please call me when you can. The airport began to empty. Families left in clusters, their laughter echoing behind them. I sat alone, clutching my phone like it was the last thread connecting me to someone who cared. A young airport attendant passed by, a kind-eyed woman with dark curls and a badge that said, Emily. She noticed me sitting there, and smiled gently. Are you waiting for someone, ma'am? Yes, I said softly. My son and daughter. They said they'd be here for Thanksgiving. She hesitated, then offered me a cup of coffee. Maybe they're just delayed. Traffic can be bad around the holidays. I smiled back, grateful for her kindness. I'm sure you're right. They must be on their way. But deep down, a small, cold voice whispered something I didn't want to hear. What if they're not coming? For hours passed. My phone buzzed at last, and I nearly dropped it in my rush to answer. But it wasn't a call. It was a text. From Lila. Sorry, Grandma. Change of plans. We'll get you tomorrow. Stay at a hotel for now, Redheart. For a moment, I just stared at the glowing screen, trying to understand the words. Tomorrow? Stay at a hotel? My breath caught. I'd flown across the country, spent my last savings, and they couldn't even pick me up? My hands shook as I called again, no reply. I typed back a short message. Okay, sweetheart. I'll see you tomorrow. Love you. But there was no response. I found a small hotel near the airport. A tired place with peeling wallpaper and the faint smell of cigarettes. The man at the counter looked surprised to see an old woman checking in alone on Thanksgiving Eve. I smiled politely and took my key. Inside the room, the silence was heavy. I set my suitcase by the bed and turned on the television, hoping for noise to fill the emptiness. The news droned in the background while I unpacked my gifts and placed them neatly on the nightstand. Then, out of habit, I opened my phone. A notification popped up. Lila posted a photo. I shouldn't have looked, but I did. There they were, my family, around a glowing table, smiling, laughing, glasses raised. The caption read, Family is everything. Happy Thanksgiving, Redheart. For a long time, I couldn't move. My heart didn't break in one sharp snap. It crumbled quietly, piece by piece. I stared at their faces, searching for the warmth I once knew. But all I saw were strangers celebrating a holiday I was no longer part of. I set the phone down slowly and whispered to the empty room. I see now. Family is everything, except me. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat by the window watching snow fall under the yellow glow of streetlights. Somewhere inside me, something shifted. Not anger yet, not revenge. Just an ache so deep it turned cold. And as the city slept, I promised myself one thing. They would remember this Thanksgiving, not for the food or the laughter, but for the day they forgot me. Morning light crept through the hotel curtains, soft and gray. I hadn't slept a wink. The cheap clock on the wall ticked too loudly, reminding me of every second I'd wasted waiting for a family that didn't care. My body ached from sitting up all night, but my heart ached more. I poured myself a cup of bitter hotel coffee and stared out the window at the empty parking lot. Somewhere out there, my children were laughing, probably passing around plates of leftovers, not once thinking about me. For the first time in my 75 years, I felt something I never thought I would toward my own flesh and blood, disgust. It would have been easier to stay sad, to curl up and cry, but tears are useless once your soul has dried up from too many betrayals. So instead, I opened my old leather purse and took out the one thing that still made me feel alive. Charles's pocket watch. The silver was worn, the glass cracked, but when I held it in my palm, I could almost hear his voice again. Don't let anyone take what's yours, Ellie, he used to say. People only steal from those they think are weak. Weak. That's what they thought of me. A fragile old woman who wouldn't notice she was being pushed aside. I opened my laptop, slow, outdated, but still loyal, and began scrolling through files I hadn't touched in years. There it was, Heart Estates Incorporated. My name still appeared in the early documents, right next to Charles's. We built that company from the ground up. I handled the books, the marketing, the clients, while he handled the deals. After he died, I was too lost to fight when Mark and Lila said, "Don't worry, Mom. We'll take care of it. They took care of it, all right. They took it from me. I still remembered that day. Lila sitting across from me. Papers neatly spread across the table. It's just a formality, Mom. You'll always have what you need. I signed without reading. I was grieving, tired and trusting. They told me it was temporary. They said I'd still be part of everything. A month later, I received a letter. My name had been removed from every board and account. No explicación. No apology. When I confronted them, Mark said, "You wouldn't understand the business side of things anymore. It's complicated." That was the moment they stopped being my children and became strangers in suits. But last night changed everything. They had forgotten that before I was grandma, I was Eleanor Whitmore Hart, a woman who knew contracts better than lullabies. What they didn't know was that 2 years ago, after a long talk with my old lawyer, I had quietly reclaimed part of the company's ownership under my maiden name, Eleanor Whitmore. I never planned to use it. I only did it for peace of mind, a small way to remind myself that I still existed. But now it was time. I drafted an email to my lawyer, Mr. Porter, a man as sharp as he was loyal. "We need to activate the transfer clause," I wrote. "All assets and controlling shares under Hart Estates should revert immediately to Whitmore Holdings." My hands didn't tremble when I hit send. For the first time in years, I felt power return to me. Not cruel power, but the kind born from survival. They had taken my money, my name, and now they had tried to take my dignity. But they had forgotten who taught them to fight. I sat back in the chair and smiled faintly at the snow falling outside. I imagined their faces when the truth hit them, when they realized the woman they left at the airport wasn't broken, just waiting. Thanksgiving had ended, but my reckoning had just begun. The week that followed passed in silence, but not sorrow. I stayed in that little hotel, sipping weak coffee and watching snow collect on the windowsill. Each day felt like a slow awakening, a shedding of something heavy I had carried for too long. I wasn't waiting for an apology anymore. I was waiting for the right moment. It came the following Monday when my lawyer, Mr. Porter, called. His voice was crisp, confident, like the first breath of winter air. "Mrs. Hart," he said, "the transfer has gone through. Hart Estates is now fully under Whitmore Holdings. You are the sole beneficiary and controlling owner." For a moment, I couldn't speak. My throat tightened, not from sadness this time, but from the strange relief of justice. "Thank you, Mr. Porter," I finally said. "Please send out the notice. They'll know soon enough." And no, they did. By Tuesday afternoon, both Mark and Lila had received the legal summons. I could almost picture their confusion. Mark pacing his office, Lila dialing lawyers, both trying to figure out how their forgotten mother had suddenly become the center of their empire again. On Wednesday, I arrived at the Hart Estates headquarters, the building I hadn't stepped foot in since Charles's funeral. It looked different now, cold glass and steel, stripped of the warmth we once built it with. As I entered the lobby, the receptionist, barely older than my granddaughter, blinked at me in confusion. "Can I help you, ma'am?" "Yes," I said, lifting my chin. "Tell Mr. Hart and Ms. Dawson their mother is here." When I stepped into the boardroom, their faces were priceless. Mark's jaw dropped, Lila went pale. They hadn't seen me in years, and now here I was, small, wrinkled, but standing tall in Charles's old navy coat. "Mom," Mark stammered. "What are you doing here?" I took my time walking to the head of the table. The lawyer beside me placed a thick folder on the desk. I looked at my children, my betrayers, and smiled. "You told me to fly out for Thanksgiving," I said softly. "So I did. But now I've arrived for something far more important." Lila frowned. "What are you talking about?" Mr. Porter opened the folder and began reading. His voice was calm, factual. "Effective immediately, all controlling shares of Hart Estates have been transferred to Whitmore Holdings. Mrs. Eleanor Whitmore Hart is the sole proprietor and CEO. Your positions as executives are hereby terminated, pending review." Mark shot to his feet. "You can't do this. We built this company." I met his glare with quiet steel. "No, I built it. Your father and I did. While you two were still learning to spell your names. I let you take it once because I believed in you. That was my mistake." Lila's voice cracked. "We're your children." I nodded slowly. Yes. And yet, you left your mother at an airport like lost luggage. You had your Thanksgiving without me, but here's something for you to digest now. Every account, every property, every privilege you built on my name is gone. Silence filled the room. Mark's anger melted into disbelief. Lila's eyes shimmered with tears, but mine stayed dry. I had shed all my tears already. I stood, leaning lightly on my cane. You told me to fly out. I did. But you forgot. I always land on my feet. As I left the boardroom, the heavy doors closing behind me, I felt a warmth spread through my chest. Not spite, not vengeance, but peace. I had reclaimed more than a company. I had reclaimed myself. Later that evening, I walked through the city streets dusted with snow. The lights twinkled in shop windows, and somewhere, families laughed over dinner. I passed a bakery and bought a slice of pumpkin pie. Then sat on a park bench beneath the quiet hum of Christmas lights. I thought of Charles, of the woman I once was, of the children who had forgotten her. And I whispered, "You were right, love. People only steal from the weak." But I was never weak, was I? A soft snowflake landed on my sleeve. I smiled and took a small bite of pie. It tasted of cinnamon, sugar, and something else I hadn't known in years. Freedom.